Music Sean Diddy Combs flew into a fit of rage, suddenly leaping over the courtroom railing and violently murdering Federal Judge Aaron Subramanian right in the middle of a packed courtroom. He grabbed the judge by the neck and repeatedly slammed his head against the edge of the bench until Subramanian lost consciousness and died within a matter of 3 short minutes. Federal officers and court security quickly subdued Diddy, but what happened that day cannot simply be dismissed as an episode of losing control. The pressing question is, why would a man already standing before the court of justice and facing serious criminal charges choose to assassinate a judge in the middle of an open trial? Was there something hidden in the classified documents presented that triggered Diddy to snap, turning him into a monster devoid of humanity? Part 1. Origins of the incident. On the morning of June 4th, the area surrounding the federal courthouse at 500 Pearl Street was partially cordoned off by law enforcement. Reporters lined up outside. Cameras constantly trained on the main entrance from the very beginning of the trial. The case involving Sean Combs, also known by his stage name Diddy, had become the focus of intense international media attention. However, up until that moment, the situation was still regarded as a complex case file with no signs of spiraling out of control. At exactly 9 a.m., the trial entered its 13th day. Representing the defense was a 4-member legal team led by Evan Marino, a well-known criminal law expert who had successfully defended several controversial figures in high trials. Diddy arrived on time, escorted by 2 court officers. He wore a white dress shirt paired with gray trousers without a tie. To many of those present in the courtroom, his appearance had noticeably changed. He looked visibly thinner. His complexion was pale and his expression nearly devoid of emotion. On the other side stood the team from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, headed by prosecutor Amy Roth, renowned for her sharp interrogations and relentless aggressive prosecutorial style. A leading role in devising the overall litigation strategy for the entire case. The charges against Sean Combs extended far beyond assault and included a series of other grave offenses such as human trafficking, operating unlawful interstate enterprises, money laundering, sexual abuse, and witness intimidation. The case file spanned over 1,400 pages and listed more than 60 witnesses. Some had already taken the stand, while others were expected to testify in the coming week. The main witness that day was Kareem Big K Davis, a former bodyguard who had worked for Diddy for more than a decade. Davis was no stranger to law enforcement, having previously faced accusations of weapons possession, involvement in nightclub altercations, and associations with several Brooklyn-based gangs. However, in early 2024, he entered into a cooperation agreement with the U.S. Department of Justice (DOJ) as part of a non-prosecution deal in exchange for testimony. It was Davis who allegedly provided the recording that proved Diddy had personally ordered the transportation of a victim across state lines, a serious violation of federal law. Presiding over the proceedings was Judge Ayo and the first Indian-American federal judge appointed to the Southern District of New York, one of the most prominent divisions in the American judiciary. Subramanian was widely respected for his precise, impartial working style and his willingness to reject demands from powerful entities when lacking a legal basis. He had previously overseen major cases such as the class action lawsuit against Johnson and Ensign and large-scale financial fraud trials. Subramanian's principled and transparent demeanor was a key reason many placed their trust in the fairness of the trial. He did not allow the media access to any unverified documents, consistently emphasized the right to a fair trial for both the defendant and the prosecution, and repeatedly warned attorneys not to turn the courtroom into a spectacle. That morning, the atmosphere inside the courtroom remained normal. Media outlets were fully present and security was heightened, though there were no signs of tension. Diddy sat silently, eyes cast downward, when Judge Subramanian entered and formally commenced the session. Everything appeared to be proceeding in order. However, there was one small detail that would only be noticed later. Approximately 12 minutes after the trial began, Diddy started to sweat, not excessively but noticeably. A security officers seated behind him testified that his shirt began sticking to his back even though the room was kept at 21°C. Almost simultaneously, a court staffer delivered a carefully sealed manila envelope to the judge. According to a court officer's record, at 9:19 a.m. the judge received an envelope labeled Volmer 9 DOJ Internal Clearance. Volmer was a term that had never been mentioned in any prior hearings. It was not part of the official case file, nor was it listed among the initial evidence. That alone caused every eye in the courtroom to shift toward the mysterious yellow envelope. As usual, Judge Subramanian made no comment to the press. He simply glanced at the envelope, nodded to the court clerk, and announced a 15-minute recess to review the newly received information. Though the contents were not disclosed, an audio technician later reported that Subramanian had made an internal phone call to the DOJ office to verify authorization for using the materials, an action rarely seen in the middle of a trial. Asses for Diddy. He began to exhibit strange behavior. A side camera captured him no longer sitting still, shaking his head repeatedly. A witness recalled. He looked like he was arguing with someone no one else could see. A legal clerk also clearly remembered, I heard him muttering, "It can't come out. Not like this." At exactly 9:51 a.m., the session resumed. Judge Subramanian re-entered the courtroom holding the envelope. He placed it on the bench and announced to the public, "We will now disclose the contents of the document marked as vulner are according to confirmation from the DOJ. A portion of the material has been partially declassified for investigative purposes. If there are no objections, I will read it aloud within the next 10 minutes. And in that very moment, everything spun out of control. Diddy looked up. His eyes widened. His voice, though trembling, was clear. "Don't open it. I swear someone will die if you touch that." He repeated the statement 3 times. On the third, he nearly shouted, leaving the entire courtroom stunned. Subramanian calmly replied, "This court does not operate under threats. If the defendant has a valid reason to object, his attorney may submit it appropriately immediately." Attorney Marino stepped forward to request a recess for a psychological evaluation of the defendant. However, R.R. Subramanian rejected the motion and declared, "The defendant is not currently exhibiting signs of being unfit to stand trial." The session will proceed. At 10:36 a.m., court officers delivered the envelope to the bench. Subramanian took a pair of scissors and began cutting through the seal. No one could have anticipated that just 1 second later, Shakam Bisould erupt into a fury right in the very place that symbolizes the ideals of justice. Part 2. Diddy snaps. PS. Just a moment after Judge Subramanian reached out to grab the scissors, ready to cut open the sealed document, Shakam suddenly let out a scream, as if someone were strangling him. The courtroom hadn't yet grasped what was happening when he shot up from his seat, grabbed the microphone from the defendant's table, and hurled it directly at the prosecution bench. The sharp sound of the impact rang out across the chamber like a lightning strike. What followed went far beyond anyone's imagination. He vaulted over the barrier with the speed and decisiveness of a professional athlete, catching the nearby court officers completely off guard. Everyone could only witness Diddy charge straight toward the bench where Judge Subramanian was seated before he suddenly leaped as if he knew exactly what he had to do. He had no weapon in his hands, and no sign that any of this had been premeditated. Every move appeared to be instinctual, as if driven by something beyond rational control. A court clerk later recalled, his face was completely pale, his eyes bulging, and his mouth was screaming something no one could understand. Diddy wrapped both hands tightly around Subramanian's neck from behind, then yanked him backward. Off his chair in an instant, the entire courtroom descended into chaos. Screams erupted from all directions as security forces rushed toward the bench, but it was too late. Diddy had already slammed the judge to the floor and used the full weight of his body to drive Subramanian's head forcefully into the edge of the bench. Blood sprayed, soaking the tile floor in red. The sound of the blows echoed like a hammer, striking cold iron. Rhythmic, violent, and relentless. Subramanian was completely defenseless, offering no resistance. One witness recounted, "He didn't scream, didn't struggle, as if everything happened too suddenly or he'd lost consciousness from